today, and you know that fathers can be quite embarrassing for some reason or another. There's a story about a father who one day went to the petrol station in the olden days where someone used to wash your windscreen for you. Do you remember those days? Did you sit in the car and they used to wash them? Anyway, one day this dad was sitting there and this young guy, first day on the job, washed the window, and the dad said, "Oh look, you didn't do a very good job, can you do it again?" And the kids in the back were going, "Oh Dad, stop being a dick." Like that. Anyway, Dad was sure he was right. And so the young boy got a bit embarrassed and started washing the windscreen again and tried really hard. And he said, "Look, you're not doing a good job. Can you just try and do it? I mean, it's not rocket science, cleaning this windscreen." And so the young boy got even redder and more embarrassed, and he was scrubbing away and sweat was going off his brow, and he finally finished, and the dad was furious. He said, "Look, I just don't believe you can't wash a windscreen. How hard can it be?" Well, then his wife went over, reached over, grabbed his glasses and cleaned them. Gave them back, and he saw that he had a very clean windscreen indeed. You know, critical people, that's what we're looking at today, critical people can sometimes see things from a very specific perspective, but sometimes they have dirty glasses instead of looking at what it actually is. Criticism is not a nice thing. People don't really like to be criticised. You know, as a preacher, I hardly ever get criticised for my sermons. I don't know about you, Nick. Hardly ever someone comes to the door and criticises it. Okay, I shouldn't really lie in the cathedral, should I? Especially when you've worked so hard on it and then someone picks up something that wasn't even a major part of the sermon and they go, "Well, you know, that part wasn't even important." Or what about the rest of the sermon? And they go, "Well, I didn't actually hear the rest. I was focusing on that small part that obviously had nothing to do with the sermon." Has anyone here built their own home? Anyone built their own home yet? Now imagine you've just finished building your own home and you're so proud with it, and you invite someone round and they begin to criticise, saying, "Oh, that's a funny place to put the kitchen. Oh, I didn't expect it to be on that angle." I mean, how would you feel? You'd feel great, wouldn't you? Just into your new house and someone comes along and criticises it. You probably wouldn't invite them around again, would you? Especially if they were right. "Oh, why didn't we put the kitchen there?" Now, criticism isn't the same as critique. Criticism is negative, whereas critiquing can have a positive outcome. Because if we don't critique and evaluate things, how can we improve? They say, whoever they are, they say that successful people have often failed many times, but they have persevered and they have succeeded. And the criticism or the critique may have actually helped them because they wanted to prove the other person wrong. Now, in the book of James, which we read this morning, it could be seen as quite a critical book. And it asks us an important question that perhaps we wouldn't ask ourselves. In fact, a lot of the Bible's like that. But at the same time, these questions have the power of revealing something really important to us. Things that probably aren't good, that don't do us any good, any benefit at all, even if we think that it might. Now, I need to make one thing abundantly clear. We need to realise that as Christians, we aren't called to be perfect. I mean, I know you can look at me and go, "Well, he's pretty close to perfect," and things like that. But no, we're not called to be perfect. I mean, God isn't naive enough to think that we could be perfect, because what does perfection actually mean? I mean, I may think that I'm perfect, But then again, there could be others who say, well, no, not really. I mean, when I played that song, I didn't play it perfectly. I had a few notes, but you guys didn't hear it, did you? Did you? Yeah, you did? No? Oh, I heard it. But what we are called to be is not perfect, but to be faithful. Faithful is actually an incredibly important part for us, part of our faith. So the question I want to ask you this morning is, what does it mean to be faithful? You know, we read in the Bible people who thought and believed that they were very faithful, and yet they weren't. We remember priests and prophets just before the exile in the Old Testament who went round doing their sacrifices and doing all those things that they were supposed to do. And we remember Jesus with the Pharisees and the problem he had with them. These people looked very faithful, very religious, did the right things. But God saw something different. And it is a really important question. And one thing that tended to come across when we look at these people is that they thought that they were pretty close to being perfect. They did the religious things, they looked good in public, like me. They knew the proper way to make sacrifices. And they were often quite critical towards others. Well, that's not me. I'm not really critical towards others. They saw themselves as better or more spiritual, perhaps. But the Bible clearly illustrates that they weren't faithful. So faithfulness is vitally important to us today also. So we need to ensure that we don't confuse the concept of faithfulness with some kind of perfectionism or religiousness. So again, what does it mean to be faithful? In James 2, it doesn't cover the whole thing, but it looks at one particular point that they were dealing with. Favoritism. Now, is this a big deal? You know, last week we had the mayor here and the MP, and they had the VIP seating up the front. Not really a lot of people took the VIP seating today, did they? Really? They don't realise that it's extra warm up the front, and there's actually a coffee machine there too if you wanted that as well. Little bits of chocolate there. Let's find out next week who's up the front. But you know, you have the VIPs, but sometimes it's said, like in James, sometimes those rich people are the ones who oppress us the most. Now, I don't want to get political, because I know Rachel's behind me, and she's quite political, but you know, sometimes MPs are people who make decisions that hurt us. Well, she'd agree with me with Nick Smith, perhaps. You know, how much good has he done for us? Of course, there's some who say, very good, yes. No. But we're not talking about politics. We're talking about something else. Favoritism, that's what we're talking about. And there's people that we do get on with, but then there's people that we don't get on with so much, or find it harder to. You know, those that perhaps smell a bit when they come into the cathedral, or they don't know what to do properly, you know, how to act, those sorts of things. That's not me, I smell okay. It's okay. But here in James we see a very different way of treating people, especially between the rich and the poor. We're told not to make any distinction at all. James goes on to say that it's actually the poor people who God has given more grace, more faith to. Which is interesting. I wonder who the poorest person here is. Find out their faith. Don't need to do that. Just something to think about. But that's not the whole sermon, so don't just focus on that part. So favouritism is not faithfulness. And this argument goes back to our greatest commandment, the one that we said today, that we need to love others as we love ourselves. Favouritism has no place in God's kingdom. Often we thought that God played favourites. Israel was God's special people. But the Bible also says that there are no favourites with God. We're all the same. No one's any better or any worse. And so when we play favourites, we aren't being faithful. We break the law of love entirely. And in fact, the writer in James goes on to say, we break these transgressions, and he brings out some rather major transgressions, adultery and murder. If we break one, it's just like breaking all of them. And the point is that we don't break the law as such. It's the law maker who we sin against. It's a little bit like Psalm 51, when David said, "It's against you that I sin." And so we live for God. And James' point is this, that we speak and we act as people who are judged by liberty, in that we're actually free from the laws that bind us. These laws that rightly condemn us, we're no longer under these laws. And so, as a result of that, it can't help but make us be merciful to others. We love because God first loved us. We don't judge others because we don't want God to judge us in the same way that we judge others. And the reason for this isn't to show that we are right or perfect. Jesus really talked about the importance of being perfect. Jesus spoke about things about being merciful, being kind, not judging others, even if they're wrong. Righteousness is quite a well-known theological term. It's all about what God has done for us, because we can't do it for ourselves. Our rightness is because Christ died for us. Our rightness is based on God's graciousness towards us. And this allows us to live a certain way, which is quite different than the rest of the world. James goes on and gives a really practical example of how we are to live this way. He talks about our deeds or our works, the things that we actually do. Because what we do is so vitally important. It's not so much what we think, because all of us think a bit differently. It may not even be so much what we say, but it's how we act. He talked about people who are in need and actually helping out those people in need, not just saying, "Oh well, God bless, she'll be right. See you next Sunday, hopefully." What we do is incredibly important. How we treat other people, what we say about them, how we judge them. And again, all this, what James talks about, is based on our greatest commandments, to love God and to love others. Again, not about being perfect, because we can't be perfect all the time. It's about being faithful. We read in the Bible of all the major characters in the Bible who made incredible mistakes. From Noah, Moses, David, all of them. They weren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they are remembered for their faithfulness. And that should be the same for us. So our faith, the reality of our faith, the proof that our faith is real within us, isn't in what we say or think. It's seen in our actions, the way we live, the way we treat others, especially the poor. And the reason we do this isn't out of duty or pressure, but because of the freedom we have in Christ, this incredible gift of love. It's great. It's a good thing. Loving all people, even assistant priests. Loving all people is our highest calling, and it is our greatest blessing. Amen? It's a little bit louder than the 8 o'clock service when I said Amen. Had a few murmurs there.